afternoon, everybody. I'm your host, Lionel Tavares from the Sabbath at Midnight, here to bring you these new t-shirts we just got made. They have the crucifix in the front, very obvious, so you could show off exactly who you represent. The back has the old school, old English. Okay, we're keeping it gangster, and we're keeping it truthful. So if you guys want to grab one of these shirts and you're not ashamed to represent Jesus Christ, and you want to help a Christian podcast grow and reach bigger audience, please reach out and we will sell you one of these shirts for a very reasonable price. If you are international, it will be a little extra, but work with me and I'll work with you. I hope you guys have a good day and God bless. Coming from the great American Southwest, from the very low desert, good morning, good evening, whatever the case may be to all my listeners around the world. I am your host, Lionel Tavares, and as always, extremely glad and blessed to be here by the Lord Jesus Christ himself. So today, it is a beautiful Sunday out here in California. We're coming at you again with another episode. We, as always, we always got very special guests on the show. We get anywhere from Marine people all the way to authors and everything in between. And today we have another author on, and, he also thinks, he's not just an author, he also thinks outside the box and kind of likes the same things that I like. And, we study the same things that, that we're kind of looking into right now. So it really piqued my interest. I'll just give you a little brief information about him. He wrote a book about Cain and kind of like connecting the dots with his own theories, like what happened before, of the theory of the pre-adamite age and the angels ruling before. It's one of those, and it's really good the way he put it together. I'm going to save all that stuff when he introduces himself. But before we get there, don't forget to like, share, subscribe. We are on all the social media platforms. Please follow us on YouTube, because that's going to be the main source channel very soon here. So thank you guys for sticking around and following and listening. It's been a blessing. The channel's been growing, so thank you for that. So let's move forward. So welcome back, everybody, to the show, Sabbath at Midnight. I'm your host, Lionel Tavares. So we have our guest right here hanging on the line. Please, sir, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us about your book, where to find it, where to buy it. Tell us where all your, to connect with you, social media, email, the whole nine.
All righty. Yes. So just like Lionel was saying, my name is Briar Kader. I'm an author. I wrote the book called Cain Untold. Cain Untold book 1, actually. We've got the second one. We're in the works right now. You can find me at my Instagram page. It's BK_Untold Stories. I actually had to look it up because I forgot what my hashtag actually was. You can email me at genesisman@live.com if you have any questions. If you want to reach out, find me on Facebook. You can look up Cain Untold Book 1. I have a page there. You can look up my personal page as well if you want. Go ahead and add me as a friend. I'm on Twitter too. I don't do a whole lot with Twitter because I don't really understand Twitter. I don't think anybody really does.
Yeah, it's just a bunch of.
But yeah, I love writing. I love God's word, and this book is basically a combination of my two great loves: my love for fantasy writing and incorporating the Word of God and all the weird, cool intricacies that I'm sure your listeners are super familiar with at this point. So glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you very much. And let's get right into it. So. As you said, you said it right there, your love for the Lord and you're into fantasy, which is that people that don't know, it's like a genre of, like me, the way I see fantasy is I love the game Skyrim. If you guys know what Skyrim is, I would say that is the ultimate, fantasy story, as far as ghouls and characters. Some people might want to argue about that, the gamers, but just for me, if you guys know, because everybody knows what Skyrim is. So the people that don't know, it's that kind of world. It's like that world of the giants and the fairies and the gnomes and the elves and the sorcerers. And it's kind of like not that too far away from fantasy. It's more like real life, right? So, I would argue that Lord of the Rings is a lot closer, to reality than a lot of other movies would actually be, at least for the pre-flood world. I would say Lord of the Rings represents what the pre-flood world looked like, and probably right after the flood. So, but anyways, that's another story. So in your book, so just, a little bit from what I got from it, guys, I read the book. I'm not going to lie, I got to like about 3/4 of the way in, but I really like the book. I'm still reading it. And what I like about it is that you incorporate like this Lord of the Rings type of like style to it. So from what I got from it, the book to the audience. So the book is about, telling the story of Adam and Eve, but, through Cain, going down Cain's lineage. And, like we really don't have any real like information, what Cain went through during those years wandering. So, my guest right here, he kind of, just puts together, his own story of what Cain, had to go through and figuring, life out, being exiled pretty much from, from the garden and from everybody for murdering his brother. So, the story's great. There's a lot of characters in there that have really strong personalities. My favorite character in there is Gimbal, so far. And as we talked in the podcast, we'll talk about why. But Gimbal's pretty much like this hybrid being. And he's just really dorky. He's very like straight to the point, but he will also tear you apart easily. Okay. And it's very clear in the book when we read that. And I like that. And, and he also, I think he did a very good job on writing what Cain's personality would be in his old age, going through life, just being, I guess, not wanted anywhere, just wandering. And, also, he has a curse, and, people are also scared to kill him too, because they think something's bad's gonna happen to them because, God put a mark on him. And even if they didn't like God, people and creatures then knew God is real, just as he is today. And that you're going to find, that's another thing too in the book that I liked, is that even the bad ones knew God is God. You know what I mean? Like nobody's denying God, in this world and during this time, it was a fact. It was just what side were you on? So, in the book, Cain just, it's a very epic journey. There's a lot of battles, a lot of sad stuff, a lot of tearful moments. And I believe it's his grandson, correct me if I'm wrong, Irad. Is how you say his name.
Yep, Irad,
so,
yep.
So it's like a story. It's kind of like what's that game called Last of Us HBO series? How it has kind of like that relationship, the old guy and the little girl. And people know what Last of Us is. I hope so. The Last of Us. It's a video game and it's a TV show. Everybody has to know what that is. It's like a relationship between the older man and the kid he's pretty much, helping raise. And it's like the same situation. Cain is this older guy. He kind of really doesn't know his grandson too well, but they kind of get to know each other on this journey, escaping this demonic witch that can like transform into different things. This is what makes it good. I'm serious. So, and this is what's happening, and you're going to break it down way better for us. And there's so many questions. So I'm just trying to tell the audience how far I went down, kind of in a quick summary. So there's like this demonic beast also going after him, and those details will save why from when we get back to it. And then I got to the part, they had to leave the fort. That's where they met Gimbal, the goat-headed man. And then I'm trying to remember everything. And then they escape there. And then there's like this crazy part too. This is the part that I remember freshly because I just this is where I kind of left off for the audience. This is how crazy it gets. They get caught at one point by like these cannibalistic, are they human? Are they hybrids? They're like these, the way I think about them, they're like these pale looking, ghoulish looking skinny people because they're starving. They live on this deserted desert. So, I'm asking the question, are they human or are they not human? Or they are
human, but they are supernaturally
Just
yes, I'll put it that way.
Okay.
We can go into that a little bit deeper if you want after you're done with the summary.
Course.
But
yeah. So at one point they get caught by, because when you're reading the book, I have an imagination. I like to read books that can make my own images. And, this scene, Cain and his grandson, they get caught by these cannibals. And then right in front of Cain, he witnesses, one group just, they're tied up, like basically crucified. And he witnesses a group just devour someone right in front of them, screaming, begging, crying, for it to stop. And they just keep eating him until he just no more talking because he's dead. It's really gruesome, but it's also like, it's so realistic of what would happen in this situation. Let's not sugarcoat things. So, that part was pretty crazy. And this is the kind of thing that's in the book that just, it just sucks you in, the story. So I got to that part, and then I'm not going to say how they got away because they got away and it's pretty cool. And then it even moves into talking about Atlantis and, a possible pre-adamite race that could have possibly have been here before Adam and Eve, called the Atlanteans. The Atlanteans would be, the king of Atlantis was Atlas, right? King of Atlantis was Atlas. And he had 10 kids, I believe, 5 sets of twins, correct?
Yep. I think you're right there. Yep.
Yeah. So if you guys are not familiar with this Greek mythology, this is the story of Atlas. Atlas is the god of Atlantis. He created Atlantis, and he had 5 sons, and there were 5 sets of twins having 10 kids. And you can kind of tie that into the 10 kingdoms at Revelation, but it's another one.
Yeah, you could definitely.
Yeah. So this is where this gentleman's book gets into, and this is why I also think it's so interesting, because he's using theology, to kind of tie in these other mythologies to possibly connect them together, because we all know there's more truth than not truth in mythology. Where, at first, Greek mythology was just all this nonsense, but now we're finding out that, there were giants and there were these beasts, and, so it's kind of more reality than it isn't. So I think that was pretty cool how you tie Atlantis in there, and not just some kind of, nonsense Aquaman, cookie cut story. You're actually going into the real story of what the ancients believed was Atlas. And again, and his 10 children. So that's where I left off at. Cain and his grandson are escaping these cannibalistic creatures that they barely got away from. And they need to cross the ocean at some point, but then there's rumors that these Atlanteans are savages too, not in the way of cannibalistic, but just warriors. If you're not on their side, you're going to be messed up too. So that's where I left off. So with that being said, let's talk about your book. How do you want to talk about it? I'm sure,
let's do it.
Talk about it like if you're telling, you are telling the audience, but from the beginning, like, let's hear your theology on it, and I'll stop you whenever I have a question or whatever, but I want to let you go.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Absolutely. So I kind of want to first talk about like what my inspiration for the book was, how that all kind of came to be. Because most people, when they go out to write a book, they don't set out to write a book about Cain. They don't set out to write a book about the villain. I mean, in today's day and age, you see more and more of that, but that's more of, people have like some kind of a fetish or some kind of like, they're all about villains nowadays, because the world likes darkness. The world is darkness, and they want to involve themselves in that. But I wanted to write a book about a villain in a different sort of way. I wanted to do it in a way that kind of showed that, no one is too far gone. And when I wrote the book, I didn't write it with the intention of saying this is what actually happened. Because we don't know. We don't know if Cain found redemption. It doesn't say that he did in the Bible, but I wrote the book with the intention of finding out, well, what if he had? Or what if he had an opportunity at finding redemption? What would that have looked like? What would his life have looked like? What would he have done? So that's one inspiration for the book, was, wanting to write a different kind of biblical story. And then on top of that, I'm a very scientific minded person. I've ever since I was a kid, I've loved everything to do with, dinosaurs, ancient mythology, ancient cultures, Stone Age people, the Paleolithic, Neanderthals, anything to do with the ancient world. I ate it up and I loved it. So I incorporated a lot of that love and that passion into the book as well. The setting for the world of wandering, the place where Cain and his grandson, as you just perfectly summarized, you did a great job summarizing, where you've read up to this point. The world that they interact in and all the animals and creatures that they meet is this Stone Age world of wandering. It takes place, in my head, I've kind of marked it around 14 to 12,000 years ago, because for reasons I can get into later, I kind of marked the time of the biblical flood at 10,000 years ago. So I wanted to give, enough time between when Cain was exiled from the land of Eden up to when, Noah's flood would have happened. So being in that setting and in that time frame, they interact with a lot of different, Stone Age people groups, a lot of different animals that were around during the Ice Age. Like, you see mammoths, you see woolly rhinos, you see saber-toothed cats, and, some of them have their name changes, their names changed for sake of the book and for, the sake of putting yourself in the mind of the character, because you don't want to give a scientific name to somebody who never would have heard that scientific name before. But like and like I was saying at the beginning, it blends not just two great loves, my three great loves: my love of scripture, my love of writing, fantasy writing, and my love of the scientific world, the whole paleontology world and whatnot. So I incorporated all those things into this book and made what I feel like is, really touching story about, a grandfather trying to do all that he can do to save his grandson. I don't know if you or any of your listeners will have heard of Ted Dekker before, but he's a Christian author, and Christian author that I really enjoy. I really enjoy reading his books. And he said something in a talk once where it really struck with me. Like, you can write, the best imagery, the best setting, whatever for your story, but people have to care about your characters. Your characters are the heart and soul of your book, and that's what's going to draw people in. That's what's going to keep people reading your book. It's one thing to have like a flashy cover, a flashy tagline on the back of the book to get somebody to read it, but it's a whole thing entirely to keep them reading it. So I really put my heart and soul in my characters. I really made sure that they had, like you said, strong personalities. And I think a lot of the time I even kind of incorporate my own personality into each of them. And I think that's something common that a lot of authors do. Get some water here for a second. So, I'm hearing that you enjoyed it so much. It really makes me, over the moon, because it definitely was a labor of love for me to put this thing together. So.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it's a very good book. It's a super solid book. And, I recommend everybody should, check it out. It's, like I said, it's like a movie in my head. I come back to it, and, I'm honest with everybody that, just to be honest with the audience, I'm like really busy. You guys that have been following me for a while, you guys know I work like a slave as a boxing coach. I'm at work like 12 hours a day. When I do read a book, if I have no interest in it, I'll read like maybe 2 chapters and I'll force myself to read one more, and I probably won't go back to it. I read this guy's book, I went back to it. And, so I have some guests where I don't read their book at all. I just let them come on. And so I wanted to finish his book because I actually was enjoying it. I'm enjoying it. I still have, like I said, a quarter of the way left. The book is, I think, 250 pages, I believe, around there.
I think that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like about page 175 around there. So I'm almost done, but it's a really good book. And as you're saying, go ahead and like, for the audience, let's start off with, so we can start talking about this. How does the book start off? Okay, we got Adam and Eve, right?
Yep.
It starts off with them, and then it starts off with Cain and Abel and their relationship, right? Let's talk about that leading up to it. The way it's written, it shows that they were really close, and and Cain loves his brother. He still loves his brother. And we're in the book, even after the fact, he knows, like he thinks about it every day for his long life, what he did. He loved his brother. And just the way you wrote it, man, it's really sad, what happened, because, they had a really good relationship, the way it's written in the book, and, have each other's back. And, just for him to get so jealous over the offering. So the way it goes is that everyone knows that Cain's offering wasn't sufficient, for God. He liked his brother's offering better. And in the book, that's when Cain snaps and he starts just thinking in his head, why is this happening to me? And everything in the past that seemed innocent that his brother did to him, such as joking with him, Cain was now thinking of all these little things as this was him being evil to me. This was him betraying me. This was him making fun of me. And that's crazy, because that's how people would sometimes get when they're mad. They'll start seeing things that were innocent, such as bad things. And he kind of just snaps and, he kills them. So let's walk us through what's going on leading up to that point.
Yeah. So I divide the book into two parts. The first part is Eden, and it takes place in the land of Eden, not the Garden of Eden, because Adam and Eve had already been cast out of the garden at this point, but in this place called the land of Eden, where you can still see the garden. There's even a part in one of the chapters where they go up to the Garden of Eden, and that's where Cain and Abel offered their sacrifice unto the Lord. And the second part is called, what did I call it? Oh my goodness, why am I blanking here? It'll come to me. But we'll focus on the first part here. The first part, Eden, it opens up with Adam and Eve and their children sitting around a fire, and Adam is telling them a story. He's telling them the story of basically the story of creation. It opens up with him being brought to life. God brings him into this garden, raises the garden up out of nothing, and he enjoys life in the garden. God creates Eve for him. He interacts with all the animals, all the angels that are living there, and can never imagine life outside of this garden. Can never imagine having any desire to leave whatsoever. So then, spoiler alert, it doesn't last forever, because we're here today. We're not sitting in the Garden of Eden right now. So he and Eve end up eating the forbidden fruit, tempted by the Nachash, the serpent, and get cast out of the Garden of Eden. But when they get cast out of the Garden of Eden, this is where I kind of take a little bit of a different spin. I have this great war between the angels of the serpent, the devil, the dragon, and the angels that are loyal to God, to Yahweh, engage in this great war, this great fight. And Adam and Eve are looking up, and they see all these angels fighting back and forth. And before they know it, everything just goes black, because basically this war of the angels has wiped out the entire cosmos. So Adam and Eve are just kind of hovering, like, what is going on? Like, there's nothing. Everything that we knew is gone. But then they hear a voice, and that voice says, "Let there be light." And there was light. And then Adam, as he's telling the story, then tells the story of the 6 days of creation, and as he sees it unfold. But the way that it unfolds is a little bit different. Whereas everything originally was very good and perfect and complete, now things have a bit of a scar to it. Now things are a little bit more dangerous. There's one part where Adam looks at some of the animals that have been created, and he's like, this is like red in tooth and claw now. These things have claws and teeth, and they're eating each other. This is not the way that God had originally meant it to be. But in the end, when everything's basically made whole, relatively whole once again, though bearing this scar of sin, he and Eve look over to where the Garden of Eden is, and they see Yahweh, God, standing outside of it, and he gives them the command to be fruitful and multiply, and basically gives them this promise that you'll be able to come back here again, but not until you learn what you need to learn on the outside. So that's the first opening scene. Then as Adam's finishing up the story, you see Cain and Abel. Well, you see Cain, it flashes to his perspective, and he's sitting there listening to his dad's story, as I'm sure all of us are when we're little kids. You know, we love listening to our dad's stories and whatnot. And Abel kind of sneaks up behind him, pulls a little prank on him, and actually have a little bit of a foreshadowing imagery there where Cain tackles him to the ground, almost like, you know, what eventually will happen when they're adults. Except, you know, it's, at this point, they're just playing. They're just kids goofing around. But, you know, it is a bit of a dark foreshadowing of what is to come. So after that, after the scene with Adam in front of the fire with the kids and everything, goes forward till Cain and Abel are adults, and most of their siblings are grown as well at this point. And they have a visitor come to the land of Eden, which never happens. They, for whatever reason, and you know, this is expanded upon later on in the novel, there are these people called wanderers that are outside of the land of Eden. When Cain had asked his father Adam about who they are and where they came from in the past, he would just give like this flippant response like, oh, they're just part of our family that, you know, left the garden or left Eden for one reason or another. Which doesn't make a lot of sense. And Abel brings this up later on in the story as well. It doesn't make a lot of sense because Adam and Eve never told them about any kids that they had before Cain and Abel. Cain's supposed to be Adam's firstborn, so it's not really a sufficient answer. And I don't answer it, and you know, for like a few chapters later on, but there is that mystery of where did these people come from? Where did the wanderers come from? And if you look at the account in Genesis 4, where Yahweh says to Cain, and this is kind of the inspiration for me including these wanderers in the book in the first place. He says to him, you will be a wanderer and a vagabond on the earth. And Cain then cries out and says, this curse is more than I can bear. Behold, I will be driven from your face, and anyone who finds me will kill me. What do you mean anyone? Who's anyone? Because at this point we just have, and I'm talking from the biblical account, you have Adam, Eve, you had Abel, but Abel just got killed by his brother, and then you've got Cain. That's it. So who are these people that are on the outside? The traditional young earth creationist response is that, well, Adam and Eve had other sons and daughters, and it says that in Genesis 5 that they had other sons and daughters, so that's the answer to that. Well, okay, but the thing is it doesn't say that until Genesis chapter 5. So why include that in Genesis chapter 4 that Cain has other people to be afraid of?
Not only that, wasn't there like a city they built? Like, who helped them build the city? I mean, all that stuff.
Yeah. So when in the biblical account, when Cain leaves the land of Eden, when he's exiled by Yahweh, he takes a wife. He builds a city. How are you going to build a city if it's just you and your wife? And by the way, where did you get your wife from? So there's all kinds of questions that are left open by the biblical account. And I think the reason why Moses does that, because Moses is the one that wrote the book of Genesis, is because the focus isn't necessarily on them. The focus is on the children of Israel. And the children of Israel are descended from Adam and Eve. You can trace their genealogy all the way back to Adam and Eve. So there's no reason to assume that there weren't other people besides Adam and Eve. You know, you'll have people sit there and say that, well, there's a passage in Acts that Paul says, you know, all came from one man. And okay, yeah, it kind of says that, but it doesn't really say one man. It says from one. And even other translations will say from one blood. So I think the purpose of what Paul's saying, he's not saying that everybody on earth is descended from one man, Adam. He's saying every person on earth is one, as in we're all partakers of the divine image. We're all equally human beings. We're all equally men and women, mankind. Give me 1 second. So that's my take on all that. I come from a young earth creationist background. I was very strictly young earth creationist. I believed that the world couldn't be more than 6,000, 8,000 years old. And, you know, there's no way that there were any other people besides, you know, Adam and Eve and their kids and dinosaurs were buried in the flood and whatnot. I was very strict on that. But and this actually is part of the story of how I came to write the novel in the first place. Is I came to realize a lot of the stuff that, and not all. I'm not going to sit here and bash young Earth creationism, because I respect that they have a very high view of Scripture. I respect that. I respect a lot of their other things that they hold to, but a lot of the things that they push and posit as truth don't have a whole lot of basis in scientific fact, and they don't even have a whole lot of basis in biblical fact. It's more that they're pushing an interpretation because that's what they've held to for so long, rather than trying to push for biblical truth. So when I came out of that, which, wait a second, did my screen just die?
No, you're good. I can see you. Well, that's a good point, though, what you're saying. Oh, we hung up. Where did you go? Hold on, audience. We lost him. Let's call him again. Hello?
Hey, I'm sorry, man. I don't know why my screen just died.
Oh, dude. We could just do audio.
Okay.
We're on the air, so get right back into what you were saying.
All right. My bad. So, yeah, coming out of the young Earth creationist school of thought and whatnot, I took like a bit of a 5-year journey on trying to figure out what I believed, why I believed it, from, a history, prehistoric history, worldview, and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I then took that and did the best thing I knew how to with it and turned it into a book, which is Cain Untold. I took a lot of the views that I developed and views on scripture, views on prehistory, and put it into a story that I really enjoyed writing, and I hope everyone else really enjoys to read.
Yeah. So how long ago did you write the book? When did you release it?
So I released the book, oh goodness, I think it was 2023. I released the first edition. Okay. And then late 2024, I revised it and added some material to it for the second edition.
Okay. All right.
Just to make some editorial changes, wanted to add a couple other scenes and whatnot, just bulk it up a little bit, make it a better story overall.
Yeah. So back to the story. So let's move forward. So we just covered that part. And then we know what happens. Gets murdered.
Yeah.
Okay, gets murdered. I'm trying to think where we go to the story. After that, let's fast forward to the part where. Let's get to the part where Irad and him have to go on the journey. That's like the beginning of the book, pretty much.
That's the part where the rubber meets the road. The part two Exile. I just thought of it.
Oh, there you go.
Completely forgot the name of my second part of my book. But yeah, part 2 Exile. It actually fast forward over 900 years after Cain gets exiled from Eden in the first place. So he's an old man at this point. Folks that read the book of Genesis know that people back, the patriarchs, the ancient patriarchs back in the day, they lived hundreds and hundreds of years old, and Cain's no exception. He lives to be over 900 years old, and he is living in this cave overlooking this valley, where he has a people group that he actually started, the people of Enoch, his son Enoch.
And why is his son so ripped? In the book, you describe him being ripped because he's older and he's been working, because the body just don't stop gaining, or what? How does that work? Because I know if you're living that long, your body has to look different. It just has to be developing different. I don't know. You tell me.
So the way that I wrote that, I make Enoch out to be this big, jacked, caveman-esque figure. I think in one scene I describe how there's this story that the elders of the tribe tell, how he killed a mammoth from 50 yards away by throwing a single spear. And then he used the tusks of the mammoth to make necklaces for all the women of the tribe. So I made him like that, actually, as a hint at things to come and later on in the storyline. So I'm sure all of your listeners at this point are familiar with the Nephilim, right? The hybrid sons of God, daughters of man. So Enoch is, in effect, one of these Nephilim, but instead of being a daughter of Adam, a daughter of man, it's a son of Adam, Cain, and a, I guess, daughter of God, because there's this spirit that attaches herself to this tribe, and the spirit goes by the name Lilith.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that you guys have heard that name Lilith before as Adam's first wife. I don't take that view in the novel. I think that that's kind of something that's developed over time and been misconstrued as to who this figure actually is. But she is a divine being. She is one of these fallen sons of God, or daughter. She takes on feminine attributes, basically. And she's one of these figures that fell with Lucifer in the beginning, in that war of the angels that I talked about, like at the fall of man earlier on. And she ends up possessing a human body, a human female body, who ends up being Cain's wife, and they have a child, and that child is Enoch. And if you read Genesis 4, Enoch is the son of son of Cain, that comes in that genealogy that goes from Cain all the way to Tubal-Cain and his brothers and his sister. So Enoch is the chieftain of this tribe. I think in the book he's like 500 years old or something like that. So again, lives a very, very long time. But in that time, he just gets super jacked, super ripped, because he is in effect one of these giants, one of these Nephilim progeny that came as a result of a son of Adam and a daughter of God, one of these divine beings. And he sires this whole tribe that he names after himself, Enoch. And correlating with Genesis 4, Cain, when he builds a city, calls it after his son Enoch. So because the setting is in the Stone Age Paleolithic world, instead of it being like a full-blown city, it's a Paleolithic village. It's still impressive. It's still a lot of people living in one place at the same time, but it's in effect this Stone Age people, kind of like Cro-Magnon men. When you see that stereotypical image of what a caveman looked like, that's these people. And they're mighty hunters. They're strong. They're great at surviving, great at hunting. And then we go into, Enoch has a son of his own, and his name is Irad. And Irad is Cain's grandson. And like you were saying in the summary, they end up reconnecting, because in the book I describe how Enoch and Cain had a falling out years before the time that the book takes place in. And Enoch really doesn't want his son Irad to have anything to do with Cain, and gets really ticked at him every time he brings it up. But there's something about his grandfather that Irad is drawn to, and he keeps visiting him, keeps seeing him. And when tragedy happens, I'm not going to spoil it, but something happens in the tribe that forces Irad to flee his people, because they basically want to hunt him down, to make him, what he thinks, make him pay for his crimes. The first place that he goes to is Cain. He runs to Cain's cave because he feels safe there. And he tells Cain what happens, and Cain's like, all right, we need to get you out of here right now. It's time to leave. So they flee in the middle of the night. They see the torches of the Amalaki, the people of Enoch, coming after him, and they skirt out of there as fast as they can.
Yeah, that's when the story starts getting like where all the fantasy stuff starts coming to fruition. So right after that, they're fleeing to this place called the Satire Forest. How do you say the Satyr Forest? Satyr Forest. Yep. And I think Cain is the one that recommends this. He's telling his grandson, we can go hide in the Satire Forest, or I think he calls it something else, the Dark Forest or something. But his grandson is like, no, that's the Satyr Forest. that's a place where, there's creatures that will kill you, eat you, whatever. And then Cain starts laughing like, that's a bunch of nonsense. It's just a story made up, to keep people out or whatever, or, just to keep people away from it. But, so they end up going into the forest, and Cain is so old that his grandson ends up finding out that he's the one that actually made up this story. Cain is the one that made up this whole story, hundreds of years ago. But when they get into the forest, they actually run into a satyr, I believe. And this is the character that get introduced. His name is Gimbal. Now, he is a hybrid creature, and, I'm still trying to understand his relation. So he is, he's like the guardian of the forest. Can elaborate on it, because he has like a lot of knowledge of the forest.
Yeah.
Who is this guy?
They flee away from the Amalaki, get into the satyr forest, and Cain thinks it's hilarious because Irad is terrified this whole time, terrified of the satyrs that live there, these goat men, savage goat men that'll eat you if you wander into the forest too far. And Cain is, he thinks it's hilarious that he's terrified of it. He calls him and the rest of his people who believe the same thing these superstitious fools for thinking this. But he's also got reason to laugh, because the thing is that he thinks that he invented the whole myth of the satyr himself. When Enoch was just a little boy, he would run off into this forest. It wasn't called the satyr forest at the time, because remember, Cain's like 900 years old at this point. He runs off he had this habit of running off into the forest and wallowing in the mud and getting messy and everything. And Cain would have to drag his butt back home and wash him up. And he got sick and tired of doing it. So he told him one day, like, hey, if you keep doing that, walling around like a pig, then the satyrs, the goat men that live in this forest, are going to find you, and they're going to eat you and roast you like a pig. So that stopped, the whole running into the forest and wallowing in the mud thing. But it ended up perpetuating this legend that there are these goat men that live in this forest. So there's a scene where Irad goes off to hunt to go and make a kill for their dinner while they're camping out in this forest. And Cain's sitting there laughing to himself, gathering firewood, like, haha, I can't believe that my grandson thinks that this is a real thing, because I made it up so many years ago, yada, yada, yada. But then he ends up getting pranked by one of these beings, one of these hairy beings that actually does live in the woods. Ends up getting his firewood all knocked over, and his flint and steel stolen, so he can't start a fire. So he's like looking around, like thinking that Irad's messing with him, but in reality, it's one of these hairy things. And he sees it pop its head out from behind a tree, and he freaks out, absolutely freaks out, goes like completely hysterical, screams at the top of his lungs. Irad comes running, and he's like, "What is going on? Like, why are you screaming?" And Cain sits there, is like, I just made them up. I thought I just made them up. I thought they weren't real. And Irad looks, and there's this big hairy beast standing in front of him, and he's like, "What do you mean you just made them up? That one looks real right there. What are you talking about?" So, turns out that this guy's not really a savage at all. He's just he's this big hairy man. He's a guy. He's just taller and has a lot of hair. He lives out in the woods. There used to be a lot more of them, but he seems to be the last one in this forest. And later on, after he takes Cain and Irad in and takes them to this safe haven that he lives at, he in effect tells them, like, no, I'm descended from your grandfather. When he's talking to Irad, I'm descended from your grandfather's brother who left Eden before he did. He descended from Cain's brother Rabbah. And I didn't mention this in the first part, but in the first part, Rabbah plays a role as well, but don't want to give away too much.
No.
So he's descended from Cain's brother Rabbah, who had left, I think it was a year before. In the book I have it as he left the land of Eden a year before Cain had left, before Cain had been exiled, which it sounds like it wouldn't be a whole lot of time, but they come to find out that time in the land of Eden, where Cain had come from and Rabbah had come from, passes a lot differently than in the outside world, this world of wandering that Cain was exiled to. So where Rabbah had been gone for a year, really thousands of years had passed. So that's how this guy Gimbal, they come to find out that his name is Gimbal. That's how he can be descended from Cain's brother Rabbah, and many, many generations passed, because that many generations had passed between when Cain was cast out and when Rabbah left. Think about it like, in Narnia, when, the Pevensey kids, they go through the wardrobe and, they grow to be adults and whatnot, and then they come back through the wardrobe and then they're kids again. No time had passed practically. So it's kind of like that. It's, when you go into the land of Eden, very little time passes. You go out of the land of Eden, entire eons of time have passed already. So
I'm thinking like Dragon Ball Z hyperbolic time chamber, bro. You know what I'm talking about?
I was thinking about that, dude, when I wrote the book. Yeah,
I'm telling you, if you guys don't know about Dragon Ball Z, man, I feel sorry for you guys. Just kidding, but look at in the show, you can go into this unit, this room. In this room, time goes by faster in there. So when they go there, when they go in the chamber, 1 year in there, only like a day goes by?
I think that's it. Yeah. They do it to train.
In the real world. So that's like that kind of like time, what's it called? Like a time, what's it called? Temporal.
Time dilation.
Like time dilation, temporal type of thing. That's pretty crazy. Yep. And that's kind of like what God said, right? Like the time passes different from, what did he say? Like a thousand years a day for him?
Or as a day. Yep. 1,000 years are as a day, and a day is as 1,000 years. So
that's hard to even think about.
Yeah, it definitely is. Definitely is. And that verse, well, there are two places in Scripture where it talks about that. There's the Psalm that actually says that, and then I believe it's in either 1st or 2nd Peter that actually quotes that Psalm and adds on. The original verse is, a day is as 1,000 years, and then in Peter, when Peter writes it, he says, and 1,000 years is as a day. When I read that verse, I incorporated that into the book, as in like, because in the land of Eden, because you're closer in proximity to where God's presence is, because you're closer to the actual garden where God lives, time passes more slowly, because a day is as 1,000 years. And then I also took inspiration from a verse in, is it first or I think it's 1 John, where it says God is light and in him is no darkness at all. And, I know that I'm kind of taking a little bit of scientific liberty with this, but in doing research and watching like science documentaries as a kid and whatnot, I remember learning that a photon, a single unit of light, a single particle of light, is no older today than it was when it first came into being. When it was first created. So time does not pass for a photon, for light at all.
That's wild.
So yeah, and as you go closer to the speed of light, time passes slower for you as well. Also, if you're closer to a strong gravitational center, like if you're going around a black hole, and I think the movie Interstellar talks about this. If you're close to a black hole, time passes much slower for you as well. So I kind of took those ideas and incorporated them into being near the presence of God, because God is light and in him is no darkness at all. So if you're closer to that light, then that means you are closer to experiencing time as that light experiences it. You can never get right up to it. You can never attain that, because he is God and we are not. We're created beings, but you can at least get a taste of what it's like being in his presence. Amen
to that. Yeah, that's very true. So in the story, you got this character Gimbal, and there's a scene in here that I want you to break down for me, because I'm curious about what's going on. Mm-hmm. Lilith, this demon or fallen angel, whatever it is, in this book, what kind of powers does she use? Because she takes the form of a woman. What kind of power does she use? Because I see that you gave her this ability to, I may be wrong, to transform into a some kind of saber-toothed tiger, or she controls them mentally.
Yeah, so that's a great question.
What's in her arsenal of powers?
Yep. So there's a part where while they're kind of on the run and everything, Cain kind of breaks down to Irad what's really going on, why they're fleeing, why they're running. And he basically tells him, like, you know, the one that you think that the person that you think you know as this Lilith is not what you think she is. She's something much more dangerous, much more ancient. So give a little bit of, you know, history of the people, the Amalaki in the book. They have, you know, their chieftain, which is Enoch, and then they also have what they call a tribe mother, who would be like the female leader of the tribe, the spiritual leader, the shamaness, so to speak. And Lilith is this shamaness for the Amalaki tribe. But what happens is this spirit Lilith, the demon, chooses a female from the tribe to possess, to take hold of. And we know that fallen angels have this ability to possess, to take over someone's body, because we see it with Judas at the Last Supper. You know, when our Lord hands the piece of bread with the sauce in the book of John to Judas, John the Apostle writes that at that point Satan entered him. So it's not just demons that can possess people; it's these fallen angels, these fallen spirit beings that can as well. So Lilith takes hold of these girls of this tribe and chooses them as a host, basically. And when, you know, she's used them up, and when they're no longer useful to her, she discards them and changes skin just like a snake. And I chose that snake imagery on purpose because of, you know, the serpent in the garden. So the human body that is pursuing them, Lilith, and this spirit being, have different powers in the spirit world. You know, the spirit, the demoness, gives her this ability to be like an expert tracker. She has the ability to transfer her consciousness from the human body into the body of an animal, which we see in the scene that you're talking about, where the Amalaki enter into this cedar forest, and there's a beast that is in the forest that's stalking them, hunting them down, and eventually starts killing them left and right. And Lilith tracks this animal down and finds that it's a knife-toothed cat, or, you know, as people know, it's in today's day and age, a saber-toothed tiger. And she basically possesses the animal and uses it to hunt down Cain and Irad in this safe haven place that Gimbal is hosting them. So she goes in this saber-toothed cat body, and Gimbal, you know, knows, he has this almost like sixth sense of knowing when something's wrong in his home, in his forest, because he's very in tune with nature. He's very in tune with the animals that live there. And he basically darts off into the darkness to try to track down whatever's happening, whatever's entered into his home, and then trying to step on his turf. And the cat finds Irad, jumps on Irad, and is about to drag him off and take him back to, you know, the tribe, because they're the ones hunting him down. But Gimbal seizes the cat by the mane, and, you know, they fight, they get into a tussle and everything, and eventually takes her overhead and breaks her back, brings her to the ground. I got to tell you, when I wrote that part, I really didn't want to, you know, do it, because, you know, I'm a bit of a softie when it comes to animals. But I think I kind of, you know, had that bleed through in the writing as well, because Gimbal, the scene right after where he kills the cat, he's looking down at his bloodied hands, and he starts bawling. He starts crying, because, you know, he knows how few of these things are left. Because mind you, this is like right up to the end of the Ice Age. So a lot of these, Ice Age megafauna like mammoths, saber-toothed cats, so on and so forth, they're starting to go extinct. They're starting to be less and less of them, and Gimbal knows it. And there's a part just a chapter later where Cain's just kind of like, it's just a cat. Who cares? My grandson's safe now, so it doesn't matter to me. And Gimbal flips around on him and basically roars in his face like, that cat had 3 cubs that are now going to go hungry and are going to probably starve to death now. Yeah. So it's not just a cat. You just think that it's just a cat because it didn't matter to you. Yeah. I really enjoyed writing that.
Yeah, that was really cool.
I enjoyed writing the part with the saber-toothed cat. I just didn't like so much the part where she had to die as a result. But honestly, there probably wasn't a better way to write it. I wanted to be emotionally jarring in such a way that it draws people's attention, and captures them.
Yeah.
You can't have happy endings in every part of the book. It
no,
doesn't work.
Of course. No, it's a things trying to kill you. We're supposed to do. So that you or them. It's an action scene. It's a real life situation. So,
right.
So then you did really well putting historically accurate the kind of creatures that would be around during this kind of time. That was really cool. The saber-toothed tigers, cats, whatever you want to call them. And then there was another one, some kind of rhinoceros one. What was the name of that?
Yeah. Yep. So the chapter right after, they, right after Gimbal kind of chews Cain out for, being so flippant about the knife-toothed cat, the saber-toothed cat having to die, they run into this big creature that, I describe as being the size of an elephant with a single giant horn jutting out from its forehead.
Yeah.
And when I read, because he's not familiar with it, he's never seen anything like it before. When he asks, like, what in the world is that? Both Gimbal and Cain respond and say, it's a monoceros.
Yeah.
And the reason why I chose that term, monoceros, mono meaning one and ceros meaning horn, it was also a name back in like the medieval days that it was an alternative name for a unicorn. I didn't want to call it a unicorn because I felt like that would kind of evoke, My Little Pony type imagery, like, rainbows and sparkles and everything. And I didn't want people to think that when I wrote about this creature. I wanted it to be like this massive beast that was just like, this image of power and might and strength.
Definitely got that image.
Yeah. So Cain and Gimbal are familiar with it. They know what this thing is. Gimbal, because they're have had been a lot more of these monoceroses or monoceri, however you'd say. I don't know. It's a made up creature, so who cares?
No, but it's cool though. It's a cool creature.
Yeah,
it's like a elephant, like a rhino the size of an elephant or something. It's crazy.
Yeah,
I like it.
So Gimbal, is familiar with them because there were a lot more of them at one point. But Cain is familiar with them because there were a lot of them in the land of Eden, where he lived, and he gives the story about he and his siblings used to ride them, and ride them from one end of Eden all the way to the other, and have races. And when they're about to, let me back up a little bit. They're actually able to approach this thing because it has very poor eyesight. They have to approach it very gingerly because if they startle it, it'll charge. And if you have something the size of an elephant with a horn the size of a man coming at you, you're not going to make it. You're going to die. So they approach it very gently, and they're actually able to pet it and interact with it and whatnot. And right as they're about to leave, Cain has a moment where he starts breaking down, because the creature reminds him of his time in Eden, and it reminds him of what he lost. So, and as he's walking away, he tries to play it off like he really, didn't break down, like he really didn't have a moment where he was about to cry. But Irad sees through it, and he's like, okay, this guy's not as gruff and tough as he's not this old goat that he pretends to be. He actually does have a soft side. There's more to him than that. Yeah. But the creature of the monoceros, while it is based on a mythological creature from medieval bestiaries, I based it on this actual real life animal called the elasmotherium.
I was about to say, it looks like, go ahead, keep going.
Yeah. So I don't know however many years ago that the bones of this creature were discovered, but it literally looks like a gigantic rhinoceros with a huge horn jutting out of its forehead.
That's what I thought.
And this horn can be like up to 6 feet long, I believe.
Jeez.
Yeah. And for the longest time, scientists had believed that it didn't interact with modern humans. Like, it went extinct like 300,000 years ago. So it would have gone extinct before modern man would have, migrated to the area where it lived. But they, I think, recently found a fossil specimen that was dated to like 30,000 years ago, which puts it within range of interacting with modern man. So that's when it started being called the Siberian unicorn. Siberia because that's where it was from, and unicorn because it looks a heck of a lot like a unicorn. So 30,000 years is a little bit out of the time range that I have the book taking place in, but I had it as like it's the last of its kind. I think that's actually what I named the chapter, Last of a Kind.
Nice.
So just because we don't have like a fossil record of something up to a certain time period doesn't necessarily mean there weren't any. It just means that there were so few that they didn't leave a trace of their existence.
True that. So also another thing I wanted to pick your brain on something is that, we all know during those times everyone lived longer than humans, right? They had longer lifespans, and scientifically that can be due to different environmental attributes, right? More oxygen, better food, whatever the case was, But what I want to say is that one thing that we do know is that certain parts of our bodies don't stop growing as we age. I would say the brow of our skull, that doesn't stop growing. I believe the bridge of your nose doesn't stop growing, and some other parts of your body on your skull that don't stop growing. And there's other parts of your body, I think it's your rib cage, correct me if I'm wrong in the audience, I'm pretty sure someone will correct me, but I do know for a fact that there are parts on your body, especially facial features, that your bones just keep growing forever until you die. Now, a lot of these Neanderthal skulls, skeletons that they find, right? They're humans. They're not half apes. Okay, so they're still humans. Their DNA, they're humans, right? But their skeletal structure is much thicker and stronger, right? And when this person was alive, it was, it was just a strong person, like the way it was built. You know what I mean? And what I want, my theory is that, what do you think of that right there not being some caveman that, whatever their theory is? What about that right there is proof that those are the remains of humans that got to live for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 900 years old?
Yeah, I've heard that before. There's a long history of theologians and creationist thinkers and whatnot looking at Neanderthal bones and linking them not just to people that lived before the flood, but even linking them to the Nephilim themselves. Granted, Neanderthals were on average shorter than the average person, the average Homo sapiens specimen for the time. But there's still an argument to be made that because of their physical might, because of how strong and how dense their bone structure was, that they might be analogous to the Nephilim from Genesis 6.
That too.
The argument. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was about to say, no, I'm open to any idea. Like, what are these skeletons? You know what I mean? Like, what, or was it like a subhuman race? Because they're human, but they're different. You know what I mean?
Right. So I've bounced the idea back and forth a couple of different ways. And the reason why the argument that can be made against them being like these really ancient people, is that you look at their DNA and, scientists have sequenced the Homo sapien genome. They've sequenced, ancient Homo sapien genome from people that lived thousands and thousands of years ago. And they've also sequenced the Neanderthal genome. And there's enough genetic difference in Neanderthal genes to where scientists can, with relative confidence, say this is a different lineage, this is a different group of people than Homo sapiens. Doesn't necessarily make them any less human. I mean, and ultimately it depends on what your definition of human is, but it at the very least makes them a different group of human, different type of human. And that's kind of where I'm at with the whole ancient man debate, discussion, what have you. Mike Heiser, in one of his, God rest his soul, obviously, but in one of his interviews that he did with a gentleman by the name of Josh Swamidass, who is he wrote a book, and I'll talk about the book in a little bit here, but Mike Heiser ended up saying his own belief about what Neanderthals were, and he said that he believed that they were human, just a different kind of human. So, we have modern man, and you can reliably trace Adam's lineage back. If you add up all the genealogies, you get like 6,000 or 8,000 years. If you account for gaps in those genealogies, you could maybe say that Adam lived like at max 14 to 20,000 years ago. But you have a fossil record of mankind that goes back, if you take the most ancient fossil specimen that can be reliably classified as human in the genus Homo, would be Homo erectus, and that goes back 2 million years. So where does that gap come from? Where's that million and change year gap come in between the first human, the first Homo erectus, and Adam? Where did all these people come from? And I've played with it a couple different ways that I could see it happening. And what I've kind of landed on, and I talk about this in the book too, I've kind of landed on that they are a product of the fallen angels, the fallen spirit beings, entering into this world, this mundane world that we live in nowadays, and interacting with it. Now what do I mean by that? There's a belief in Orthodox Christianity and beliefs in folk religion and pagan mythology all throughout the world, that there are these spirits, these nature spirits that interact with the world. They cause things to happen. There's a spirit of the water, there's a spirit of the sun, there's a spirit of the grass at your feet, and all the animals have spirits and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I interpret it to be like these spirit beings took the world that they lived in. They entered into this mundane world that we live in earlier than Adam by possibly 2 million years. And in interacting with the species and the animals and whatnot that lived here, they ended up producing a race of humans that are different than Adam, but ended up being close enough to the point where they could interbreed. They could interact and breed with one another. And you can see evidence of that in we have Neanderthal genes in our DNA. Almost everybody on Earth does.
Yeah.
In 1 second.
Interesting.
So, as they messed around with different animal groups and almost like selectively bred humanity out of, ape-like creatures, ape-like beings, into Homo sapiens that we know today. They come up to the time of Adam, when Adam's children would have ventured out, Cain being the first. And that's where you get the people that Cain interacted with, the wanderers. And that's where he would have gotten his wife from. And that's where, after Cain met his wife, they had children, and their children had children, so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. It's the mingling of Adam's bloodline, the people descended from him, and this humanity that is then descended, so to speak, from these sons of God, these fallen spirit beings.
What do you think? So, in your opinion, what do you think these people look like? Like the ones that come from, like you said, these spirit beings, the 6-day people, whatever they are. What do you think they look different from Adam and Eve's image? Like, because some people, like, I've heard some crazy theories before, and everybody has their own. Like, some people would say like Adam and Eve would either be the black people and those other people are the white people, or like some stupid stuff like that. But I know there's like some more truth to it. Like, what, like the reality, like what do you think? Like, do you think they look different though? Like, do you think they're like more like angelic looking, I would say, because of their fathers? Like, what do you think? Like, because there has to be something, all jokes aside, there has to be something to this look that we have as humans, because why is red hair and green eyes such a rare gene? Like, where does it come from? Someone specific, you know what I mean? Like, what do you think these people look like?
So if you go back, like I was saying, 2 million years ago, there's enough morphological difference in skeletal structure of Homo erectus to say that they were a different species. And they've done like facial reconstructions and artistic reconstructions of what they look like. And they definitely look different. I'm not going to lie. They had a more pronounced brow ridge, sloping forehead. You go up to Neanderthals, they had what's called an occipital bun, which means that the back of their head jutted out a little more, by the way, some...
Like the Nephilim, right? Like the Nephilim skulls?
Well, not to that degree, like the Paracas skulls, not to that degree, but definitely noticeable to where it would jut out a bit more.
Interesting.
And paleoanthropologists have interpreted that to mean that they had a higher visual acuity, meaning that they were much better hunters. They were much more tactically minded than we are. So yes, when you look at like these ancient people groups, these ancient human species that came before us, they definitely look different. But then you get up to about 300,000, 50,000. And, as you get closer and closer to that 10,000 year mark, they look more and more like us. They lose the pronounced brow ridge.
Yeah.
They start to have more what's called gracile features. In paleoanthropology, there's two terms. There's robust, which, describes people that have the pronounced brow ridge, the robust skeletal frame, much more, stocky looking people. And then you have the gracile features, which, you lose the brow ridge, your bone density is not as much, you're not as stocky and whatnot. And they attribute that to what's called self-domestication. So they basically say that mankind domesticated itself around 15,000 years ago, as we became more, sedentary, more farming oriented instead of being hunter gatherers. So it wasn't so much that our genes changed, our DNA changed, which it did. It was more our lifestyle changed. So the way that we look changed as a result. And I think therein lies where Adam's influence can actually be seen. So to give a little bit of context, the Neolithic Revolution is a time period in human history where we started farming, we started raising animals, started raising crops instead of foraging for food, and started raising animals instead of hunting them down and whatnot. You look at what Adam was doing in the garden, and even after that, that's what he was doing. He was a husband. He was a man that was not husbandman. He was a farmer. He was a man of the field. He grew his own crops. God says in the curse that you will eat bread and the sweat of your face, and you'll eat the plants of the field, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So he wasn't what you would call a hunter gatherer. He wasn't like this caveman like figure that was going out and slaying mammoths. So when you see that change in the way that people lived, I think that's when you start to see people who are descended from Adam, from that lifestyle, that agrarian, that's the word I was looking for, agrarian lifestyle, being intermixed with people that are more of this hunter-gatherer lifestyle. So from the outward appearance, I don't think there would have been too much of a difference between someone who is descended from Adam and someone who would have been, descended from the sons of God, the fallen spirit beings. But the difference came with the change of lifestyle, the way that they were doing things, the way they were getting food. And just I just want to emphasize that, the belief that a lot of people have with, the people outside of the garden, people outside of Eden that Cain interacted with were black people and whatnot. That is complete bogus. There's no evidence for that in scripture whatsoever. And I honestly think that comes from people taking something that it comes from them taking like a biblical truth of there being other people besides Adam and Eve and twisting it and manipulating it for their own gain, to justify their own racist and disgusting views, which is really a shame. Honestly, that's kind of a tactic of the devil, right? It's a tactic of the enemy.
It's just
he
silly.
takes something that's true and twists it and manipulates it so that people, when they hear like something along the lines of, there were people other than Adam and Eve, they automatically associate that with
black and white.
Racist.
It's always like that.
Exactly. So, then in doing that, Christians that, are scientifically minded ended up either getting blackballed by, other Christians or get blackballed by people who are atheists. So you end up in a pickle either way. And like I said, I think that that's ultimately a ploy of the enemy to try to silence the truth and try to twist people into a frenzy.
Absolutely. So now, we got that part out of the way with the question. That's a really interesting theory. There's a lot to go on there. It's a whole nother podcast. So in the story, we get to find out a little bit about these people that we were just talking about, before Adam and Eve. Okay. So we got a pretty good theory on that right there. They're living a different lifestyle. They weren't, I guess they weren't, maybe they never seen this kind of living before, farming. Maybe this was new to them, something completely new, so who knows, how they were living before that, because everything is taught, at some point, people need to be taught things. You just don't learn things by accident. So maybe that was something they never seen. It was never taught. God never showed them anything like that. So when they saw that, it was like an epiphany, man. It's like, what? Like, we've been hunting the whole time, killing these animals, like just physically, torturing ourselves every day, hunting and running and, all this stuff, when we could have just been raising them, breeding them. Like that would be an epiphany if you never thought about it before. That would just blow your own mind. So I think that's very interesting if that's a theory to think about. So also in the story, as we're moving forward, we start getting into how there is this race of these masters of the sea, what we were talking about earlier in the episode, talking about the people from Atlas, the Atlanteans, which he doesn't use the word, or you don't use the word Atlantean in there. I'm just saying that, but it's the same thing. Atlas, Atlanteans. So we start talking about these people from Atlas, the Atlanteans. What history did you use, to write this down, write this down to put this in your book? Because I forgot the name of the book that I read. I forgot the name of the guy, but I have it in my other room. I'll think about it later. But he goes into some very ancient sources for Atlantis, from different people, like even Plato. I think he was one of them talking about it. But I guess this place used to sit between the Pillars of Hercules, and that could be argued, I guess, nowadays, or where that's at. But it looks like it sits right in Italy, I think, right by Italy, or am I correct? These two, there's these landmarks that look like two pillars, and people associate with that.
Yep, I've definitely heard the Italy interpretation. I've heard that people have said that it's one of the Greek islands, like Santorini. I've heard Sardinia as being one of the interpretations. I cannot for the life of me remember the name of the guy. He's a guy that comes on Joe Rogan a lot. But he has this theory that Atlantis actually was where modern day Mauritania is in Africa. And he gives a whole video and discussion about why he thinks that's the way it is, or that's where it is, and does a fantastic job about it. Just look up on YouTube Atlantis and Mauritania, and I'm sure you'll find the video. Great video. But that's where I in the book have Atlantis is in modern day Mauritania.
Okay.
And the reason why I find the argument so compelling is because in Mauritania is this chain of mountains called the Atlas Mountains. And a lot of people don't realize that Northern Africa had a great Greek influence. Like a lot of them had the same myths, the same legends, the same stories that the Greeks had, because they were seafaring people. They sailed all over the Mediterranean, and they traded with all these tribes that lived in Northern Africa, like the Berbers and whatnot. And they would take their stories, and the Greeks would take their stories, and they'd blend them together. And I think that's kind of what happened with the story of Atlantis, because we typically interpret it as being a Greek myth, because Plato wrote in Critias, I believe it was in Critias. He talks about Atlantis being 9,000 years before his own time. He gives a description of what it was like, and how there were elephants there and whatnot, and where else do you find elephants but Africa? I think, I honestly think what happened is not the Mauritanians, but the people that lived in Mauritania and then went up to the North African coast, told the Greeks their stories of their ancestor Atlas, who lived in these Atlas Mountains, founded these Atlas Mountains and whatnot. And the Greeks then took that, and that's where we get the modern notion of Atlantis. And it's interesting because there's a place in Mauritania called the Eye of the Sahara. Amazing looking structure. You can see it from space, and it's got like these concentric rings that, these beautiful blue concentric rings. And if you look at Plato's account of what Atlantis looked like, and I'm probably going to get the numbers wrong, but I believe he said that it was a city that was surrounded by 2 circles of land and 2 circles of sea, something along those lines. And if you look at the Eye of the Sahara, this geologic structure, that's pretty much exactly what it looks like. So because of that, because of that compelling argument, that's where I chose to put the Atlantis in my book. I don't outright say Atlantis first for a while in the book, because I kind of wanted to make the reader work for it a little bit. Yeah. So I call the people that are from this city, supposedly this place, the sons of Atlas. And when Cain is describing it to Irad, he says that these sons of Atlas are descended from a god named Atlas, and he's just heard tales of them. He's heard stories about them, but he doesn't even know if they really exist. So then Irad gets this idea. Well, that's perfect. Most of the tribe of the Amalaki, the people that are trying to chase us down, they don't know how to swim. So what better way to escape than to ask these people to take us on their boats and get us out of here? And Cain at first thinks that it's an awful idea. Cain has a habit of thinking that all of Irad's ideas are awful ideas at
he's
first.
Negative all the time.
Exactly.
Negative,
he's this grumpy old man. But as he thinks about it and weighs his options, because they don't really have a lot of options, he realizes, no, the kid's right. There's no real other opportunity for us here to get away, so we might as well just try to get to the coast and see if we can find where these people are, and see if they'll take us out of here. We'd be free of Lilith and her horde for the rest of our days, and why not? We're going to try.
We got to lose, right?
Because exactly, they don't have anything else to lose. So that's exactly what they do. Unfortunately, they leave Gimbal behind in the Savior Forest.
I forgot about that. He stays behind. Yeah.
I just couldn't see a 9 foot tall hairy man walking through the desert and doing very well.
Yeah.
So I had to leave him in the forest where he belonged. And there's a scene there where, Cain kind of looks at him and he sees his brother Rabba in his face. Even though he's many generations after his brother, Gimbal, he still looks him in his face and sees him, and for the first time kind of sees Gimbal as a man instead of just this big hairy beast. So they kind of have a moment where they say goodbye, they give hugs and everything, and Cain shows his humanity again there a little bit, and then Cain and Irad take off into the desert, and Irad, up to this point, Cain is like 10 paces ahead of Irad through the whole trek, through the whole thing, just because he's used to wandering. He's used to being on his own. And Irad's just not. He's not used to, hoofing it for hours and hours a day. So when they get to the desert, because Irad's taller and he's got a longer stride, he's younger, he can handle the desert a lot better than Cain can. So he's like 10 paces ahead of Cain, saying, "Come on, old man, hurry it up." Cain, obviously is being gruff and grumpy and everything, because that's just who Cain is. And then they reach nightfall, and Irad's like, "All right, should we stop? Make camp?" And Cain's like, "What? You can't. Don't you know that it's best to travel in the desert? Let's go." Yeah. Trying to one up and being the the professional wanderer and whatnot. So they keep trekking off into the desert, and then they see this big glowing mass over on the horizon in the desert. It's flat, so you can see for miles in one direction.
Yeah.
And they look and they see it looks like torchlight, but they can't really tell. And as it gets closer, they start seeing like these limbs and these hands starting to shift and shadow from the torchlight. And Cain immediately recognizes what it is. And he's like, "Get behind this sand dune now. We need to get out of here." So as they're hiding, like this mob, horde, whatever you want to call it, storms past. They're hooting, hollering, snarling. Sounds like a stampede of wild animals. And Irad is like shaking in his, not boots because they didn't wear boots, but you know what I mean, shaking, terrified. And he's like, what in the world was that? And Cain's like, that's a group of people called the Amalaki. And maybe some of your listeners can pick up on the connection there, Amalaki and another famous group of people in the Bible, the Amalekites.
Oh yeah, I'm about to say that's remind me of that too.
Yeah. So the inspiration for these Amalaki. Well, let me first tell you who the Amalaki are and whatnot in the book. So they're this group of roving cannibals that just run from one side of the desert to the other, back and forth, just scouring all over, trying to find stragglers, people that are, left behind or just wandered into the desert for too long, and they capture them, and they don't always drink them dry. In fact, a lot of the time what they do is they'll keep them alive for as long as they can so they can continue to drink their blood. But this one night in particular, because they caught 4 people in one night, they decide to set up camp, and Cain and Irad end up being on the menu themselves, like what you were talking about, them being bound to posts around a fire, and these Amalaki ghoul-looking things come out from the shadows, and their leader goes by the name of Belial. He sits there and says, like, because you guys have done so well and you've caught 4 victims, we're just going to drink these people dry, and we're just going to have a feast. And that's exactly what they do with this one poor guy. He's sitting there howling in pain, and they're just, I'll let
awful.
The book do the describing because I don't want to get too graphic.
Awful. It's awful.
Absolutely awful. So the reason, the inspiration behind the Amalaki comes from the Amalekites in Scripture, because Amalekite, it can be interpreted, the Hebrew can be translated as people who lick blood, or people who lick, and it's the innuendo is that they lick blood. So, and actually, I don't know if anyone's watched that show, House of David, on Amazon Prime. They do a great job of depicting the Amalekites as these bloodlickers.
The one in the cage, right? The one they put in the cage as the king. He's all like,
King Agag. Yeah. They did it. I think that show is fantastic, by the way. I think it's absolutely amazing. But that's like almost exactly what I pictured these people to look like.
Yeah, people need to watch that show, by the way, too. If you guys want to watch a good show, man, that show is last episode. So that last episode, I rewatch it like every day to motivate myself. Man.
So good, so freaking good.
Yeah.
Cannot sing its praises high enough. But those people, the Amalekites, are the inspiration behind the Amalaki. You might ask the question, well, didn't the Amalekites live like way after, Cain and Abel, and way after the flood and whatnot? And the answer is yes. My reason for incorporating them into my timeline in the story is because there is a passage in the book of Numbers where the prophet Balaam, he's giving this oracle, he's giving this word of the Lord, a word from the Lord, and he is basically calling out all these people groups that live in the area. The king of Moab had hired him to curse the nation of Israel because the king of Moab didn't like how Israel was on his doorstep. He didn't want to deal with them, so he hired Balaam to come and curse them. But the Lord puts words in Balaam's mouth, and one of the nations that Balaam actually ends up cursing is the nation of Amalek, the Amalekites. And there's a phrase there that he says where Amalekite was the first among the nations. So you wonder, like, well, how can that be if, the Amalekites came so much later? How can they be considered the first among the nations? If you look in, I believe it's Genesis 14, either 12 or 14, there's this big battle between these 5 kings and, a bunch of kingdoms in the land of Canaan. And in the description of the battle, there are a lot of giant tribes that are described. There's the Zamzumim, there's the Emim, there's the Rephaim. And then in there, there are 2 other people groups that that are listed alongside these giant tribes, and one of them is the Amalekites.
No way, I know that.
Yeah, so the Amalekites were at least around during the time of Abraham, which is supposedly before the time that the Amalekites were ever established as a nation, because Amalek, I believe, was the grandson or great-grandson of Esau.
Wow.
And he's the father of the Amalekites, and Esau obviously comes after Abraham. So there's this notion that there's an older Amalek, there's an older Amalekite people group, and then there's a later Amalekite group that's descended from Esau. And the Amalaki in my book, I take to be this older Amalekite group. Or at least their progenitors. That's why they have more of a primitive sounding name, the Amalaki. So, getting back to the story, Cain and Abel look like they're going to be dinner. They look like they're just going to be, eaten, and there's nothing that they can do about it.
And they give, man, if you can, man, tell them about the example they do to that person, because they have a third person tied up.
Yeah. Are you talking about the guy that got eaten?
Yeah.
Yeah. So as they're bound, these 4 people, Cain and Irad being across from each other, and then 2 other people being bound to these posts, like all the Amalaki jump on this one guy that's on Cain's right, and as I was saying, he's howling in pain, so on and so forth. They're like purposely biting at bigger blood vessels to try to get bigger gulps of blood.
It's like they know where everything's at. That's so gross, man. That's crazy. So
as they're as they're finishing up him, some of them start to look over at Irad and start going over to him to try to get a piece of him.
Yeah.
Cain's like freaking out, trying to bust out of there to try to save his grandson. All the while, this freaking demon Belial is bearing down on his neck, about to take a bite himself, and he's screaming. And out of nowhere, these people come to their rescue. these people that just come out of the desert and they go to town. They slash and hack and, cut limbs, sever heads of these Amalaki, and end up just making a freaking mincemeat pie out of them. Basically, there's nothing left.
Absolutely.
And the ones that are left are either, holding their throats, running off into the desert, squealing, or trying to stop the blood from their severed arms.
Missing limbs and stuff like that.
Yeah. So
I wanted to run something by you really quick, and this might get the audience, some people in the audience upset, but I'm just asking legit questions. All right, so check this out. The Amalekites, right? Just the way they carry themselves, even the way they dress, the rituals they do. Now, I've heard theories that a lot of these Canaanite type of tribes, a lot of them are descendants of the South America type of ancient tribes, right? And a lot of people don't like to hear this because they're more worried about their culture and their country they're from rather than truth, right? But it's too bad, okay? I would argue that a lot of those Aztec Mayan cultures, the ones that were drinking the blood and eating people's hearts, chopping their head off, dressing exactly like the Amalekites, kind of, with the tribal gear. I mean, I would say that that's kind of like their descendants. What would you think about that?
Well, at the very least, they're definitely inspired by the same spirit.
Yes.
At the very least, they're inspired by the same spirit.
Yeah.
Because you do see human sacrifice. You see that kind of behavior through different cultures all over the world. And it's crazy because you see pyramids built all over the world as well. I'm not as well versed in ancient mysteries and ancient, that sort of realm as I am in prehistory, but I've definitely dabbled in it and I've looked into it a bit. And there's definitely something to be said for, the commonalities in these different cultures all across the world. And while they may or may not, I'm not going to say one way or the other because I honestly don't know. While they may or may not be blood descendant from each other, have a common blood ancestry, I do definitely think that there is a common spiritual influence. And that spiritual influence even exists today. You look at Planned Parenthood, you look at the abortion clinics and whatnot. It's child sacrifice. We just put a white lab coat on it and, dress it up nice and, say, oh, well, you think that because you do it behind closed doors that it makes it any better than, doing it from the top of a pyramid? It doesn't make it any better. No. These beings, these demon beings are bloodthirsty and they want to ruin humanity and ruin our moral compass in any way they possibly can. And there's no better way to do that than sacrificing your fellow man or sacrificing your child.
Yeah. And then making you believe that it's not going to rain until we get a sack. It's not going to rain. The sun's not going to come up until we get a 3-year-old boy's virgin sacrifice. Who's going to volunteer? Who's going to volunteer, right? Sick, man. Yeah. So sick. Yep. So I just wanted to run that by you because I've done some research on that a while back, and I see that a lot of the Canaanite tribes are the ones that left, a lot of them, that left the promised land, that got away. They all kind of, a lot of those giants too came to the South Americas. They ventured out, they got on the ocean, got on the reed rafts. That's what the ancient people of South America said. They said they saw these giants on giant reed rafts. Okay, they came from somewhere. Okay, they came from somewhere, and you get the same story from the South Americas all the way to the North Americas where we're at. We get the same. They're on these rafts, they're on these boats, and a lot of them came straight butt naked on these boats. Even the conquistadors heard the same exact stories when they got there too. It's in their diaries where we get our history from. Christopher Columbus, all that stuff is in that same diary. They didn't put that part in the book. But so that's what I think about all those tribes. I think there's a lot of connections to that. So moving on into the book, this is the kind of part where maybe we could end up the episode, give me a little info on it. I got to the part where we're talking about the Atlanteans, moving past that. So what is going to happen next? What happened? What is the bait? So what are you hiding at the end? I know there's a big thing at the end. There has to be, Give us some hints. Give us some hints about it.
So Cain is going to experience a blast from the past like no other.
Okay.
I mentioned how he's 900 years old. He hasn't just been wandering the earth doing nothing for 900 years. There's been other things that he's been doing. There's been other things that he's been involved in. So we're going to get an idea of some of the things that he had done and some of the people groups that he'd interacted with in his time. We'll see Irad make some connections of his own with people and start to get this feeling like he's at home again, start to feel like he can make some sort of semblance of a life outside of his tribe. And then, as an author, I have to kind of dangle the carrot and
go ahead, man. It's a great book, man. It's a great book. I'm gonna get myself a physical copy as well. It's awesome. Man.
Yeah. But they're gonna be on their own again. I will tell you that they do meet the Sons of Atlas. They find them.
Nice.
I'm not going to tell you how that goes, but they do find them. And toward the end, at the very end, there's a big cliffhanger.
Yeah.
And Lionel, I'd love to hear what you think of the cliffhanger when you finish
I'll definitely get to it,
because I think it's gonna drive you crazy, but in a good kind of way.
No, I like stuff like that, man. It's fine.
But I'm really looking forward to see what book 2 has to hold. It's crazy because as I was writing this book, I remember hearing a quote, not a quote from Tolkien, but like learning how he viewed his own work, the Middle Earth and whatnot. He almost viewed it as he was like uncovering Middle Earth, like he was at an excavation of a ancient site, like he was chipping away, and as he dug deeper and deeper, he found more and more of his story, more and more of Middle Earth at the heart of it. And that's really kind of what I felt like I was doing when I was writing this book. I really felt like as I was writing, I changed things here and there, but I really felt like I was uncovering something. I really felt like I was digging deep into this world that just kind of took on a life of its own. Super excited to see, where the rest of the story goes. It's definitely going to go beyond Cain. I will tell you that.
Nice.
Because a lot of people probably don't know this, but there are descendants of Cain that are present in the Bible even after the flood. So his story in a sense continues on past that. So I'm planning on making this into a long overarching saga across biblical time. And I really hope that people decide to go on this journey with me as we delve in.
Dude, you should definitely do some kind of like this. Like it's really good the way it's written, and the audience, like, I'm not trying to sell anything. I don't make any money if this guy sells his book. I'm being 100% serious. It could be like even like an epic video game or something too, man. Or epics like a short TV, like a 4-part movie or something like that. You know what I mean? It's pretty cool. Yeah. You guys should definitely check it out. Just a couple more.
Just so long as it doesn't end up on Netflix. Because I've heard what Netflix is doing to Chronicles of Narnia, and if there's one thing that
I didn't even know they're doing that. What are they doing? They're making a Narnia TV show.
So yeah, they're making a Narnia TV show, and they are having a female voice Aslan.
Oh God!
So if there was ever a reason for me never to get a Netflix subscription ever again, that is the number one reason.
They just can't leave things alone, man. They just
they can't. They can't.
It's impossible for them not to do it, even though it takes more work to do that. They want to do it. It doesn't make it doesn't make any sense outside of just wanting to piss people off at this point, because I don't think anybody wants that. So, but you definitely could adapt it to something. Like if you probably send it to Netflix, it probably try to buy it, but probably try to turn it into some kind of left wing pandering type of video. But it's definitely hold that thing tight and only do it when it's the right way, But one thing I wanted to say about another question I had about the book. So this character, what was that character's name? So Lilith in the book, is she the one all the way to the end? She's the villain all the way to the end?
She's going to end up being the villain, the main villain of the second book as well.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
That's interesting.
I'm definitely going to delve more into her backstory, because I hinted at it a little bit in the book. I didn't really, I described what she was, and how she got to where she is, but I didn't really go into who she was and why she was the way that she was.
Yeah.
And in the second book, I'm going to plan on doing that a lot more, delving into her character, and almost not making the reader feel sorry for the demon, the fallen angel that's possessing the body.
Yeah.
But definitely making the reader empathize with the human that is trapped with this demon that's taking hold.
Okay.
So
with the Lilith, I try to think where I read about her in what what's the best word I can use in the most truthful, whatever document, or I don't know how to say it, but I think I read her in the apocryphal book, the Book of Caves or something like that. You ever heard of that before? It's like the story of Adam and Eve. It's like a Gnostic, it's like an ancient Gnostic book. It's called the Cave of Treasures or something like that.
Yep. I know what you're talking about. Yep.
If I'm correct, what I mean by that is it's like an old ancient writing that someone wrote.
Yes.
And that's like the only thing I've ever read that has like, quote unquote historical basis to it, background, whatever you want to call it, some kind of, oral history to it, is that, I think it was out of that one right there. And it does kind of say the same story, that she was the first wife of Adam, and something, I forgot what happened, but something happened where it just didn't work out and she wasn't good enough and they had to make Eve. What was that? Do you know what was that issue?
Yep.
Why? What happened?
Yep. So the whole concept of Lilith being Adam's first wife, basically, I think I'm pretty sure that it comes from a rabbinical interpretation of Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. In Genesis 1, it says God made them male and female. And some rabbis have taken that to be interpreted as, oh, well, Adam had a first wife because they were created together at the same time. Because in Genesis 2, it says Adam was created and then God made Eve out of Adam's rib. So that's where this idea of Adam having a first wife comes from. You then go into, the more Gnostic texts and whatnot, and Second Temple literature that delves into that a little more, where they then add a backstory for this woman, this first wife of Adam, calling her Lilith, and basically saying that the reason why she was cast out was because she wouldn't submit to Adam. And while keeping it a little bit PG, she basically wouldn't give Adam what he wanted.
Why?
You can fill in the blanks there.
Is there a reason why, though?
Because she saw herself as equal to Adam. You got to figure, back in the ancient world, there are a lot more. They didn't have the women's rights that we have today, or that the Christian world has even brought into the world today.
Okay. I'm just trying to. That's like weird, but like, does it? Okay, if that's her case, like, it still doesn't like benefit anybody, because it's not like it's not like it's a one-way thing. Like, she wants him too, but now she's just hiding her urge just to prove a point.
Well, that's exactly right.
It already sounds like the first liberal woman already. Like, this is
and that is why Lilith has become a symbol of witchcraft, and the Wiccan world, and left-wing women a lot of times will praise Lilith for being this great patron of women's lib and whatnot, yes, sexual liberty.
Just that little thing you told me right there, resonated with that little thing, just the reason, just because she just wants to show that she can, just connected my dots to 10,000 different versions of that I see every day on social media. It's all them. They're all the same person. All the robots, NPCs repeating themselves.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So the way that the Bible actually, because the Bible does actually mention the name Lilith, mentions it one time. And it's not in any kind of reference to Adam or Eve whatsoever. It's actually in reference to, I believe, the land of Edom, which is Esau's people descended from Esau. How it'll end up being a wasteland and wilderness and destroyed after, I believe, Babylon comes in and lays waste to it. And it says the way that the King James interprets the word Lilith or Lilith, Lilitu or something like that, some sort of analog to Lilith in Hebrew, they interpret it as screech owl, which, you know, if you read the King James Version, they take a lot of like spiritual terms for different demons in the ancient world, and they try to ascribe actual physical animals to you know, the name, because they were more comfortable with it, and because they just weren't familiar with the way that the ancient people view the world. But in reality, that word Lilith or Lilitu, it comes from a Babylonian name for a demon, a female demon that would sneak into the window in the night and steal babies or kill babies. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And you would have to invoke the name of another demon to prevent this demon from coming in and killing your children.
What a mess.
Oh yeah. But you can see the commonality.
Demons casting out demons. Demons casting out demons, pretty much, right? You know what that sounds like to me? It sounds like the Catholic Church. So
there's definitely an argument to be said for that, for sure.
Yeah, you already know how. If you follow me, you already know how I feel about that. You already know. I look at, and you know what's crazy about this? This is for everybody who probably thinks like, what happened to Lionel? Out of nowhere, it just came out of nowhere, like this sudden fire. Like you see the show David House of David, right? Did you see the last episode? Okay,
I did. Yeah.
Okay, the part where David's walking to the battlefield, and when he hears Goliath talking all that mess about, oh, your army's weak, your army's that. David's kind of mad, but the first time he hears Goliath say, when he blasphemed God's name, it has that flashback where that lion roars, like the lion awoke, right? Remember that scene?
Yep, I do.
That's how I felt the first time I heard this dude, Voice of Reason, Alex on Instagram, the first time I saw his video, and he was saying this most ridiculous, blaspheming God, like saying, he says something like the church is above the Bible, God's word. Like, I was like, what? When he said that, that's how I felt, like a lion awoken in me. And I was like, there's no way that these people are saying this blasphemous thing. The church came before the word of what? So ever since then, it's been like 2 months of just war with this whole belief system. So that's where all this came from, and it's just crazy because I just can't stop doing it now. But I'm going to move on to another subject pretty soon here. Like every time I think I'm done with it, I'll see someone say something ridiculous again, and I'll have to make another video on it because I just can't let a lie just sit there unanswered. It's just insane to me. So, that's where that was going. It's hard, dude. It's hard when people talk bad about God, dude, it's hard to just let it go. It's like, dude, you can't be talking that mess around here, man.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And the same way that you feel about that subject, that's how I felt about, I talked about how I came out of, young earth creationism and whatnot.
Yeah.
For the longest time, I had the same fire under my butt about, that sort of thinking, because there were some things that I'm not going to name any names because I'm sure there are, good Christian people that work for these organizations and whatnot. But there were some things that I would read that just were outright dishonest, completely dishonest about what God's word was saying, completely dishonest about what the scientific evidence was showing. Exactly. And I was very vehemently against it for a while. So I totally get that fire. I totally get that, that want to set the record straight.
Of course, man.
And keep things, true to what it's actually, keep the word and keep Christianity true to what it's actually meant to do, what we're supposed to be here doing on this earth.
Yeah.
It's not to push a worldview. It's not to push our own ideas out there.
That's what I tell people.
The gospel of Christ.
I tell people all the time, especially who I argue with the most. I argue with a lot of Roman Catholics. Oh, you're just doing this. You're just doing this because you hate us. I was like, no, I don't hate you guys. I said, I'm arguing with you guys. I'm trying to correct you. I said, I'm telling you guys the truth. And they go, that's just your opinion. I said, it's not my opinion. I said, it's the truth. I said, we can disagree, but you would be wrong. I tell them just like that because I know I'm right. And I'll tell them like that. And I'll say it to them straight like that. I think I'm cocky. And I tell them, look, I'm here telling you the truth. I said, if the Roman Catholic Church was the church God established and it is the truth of all things, I would be a Catholic with you right there, bro. But I'm not, because the more I study the Bible and the history, the more and more I don't see anything Catholic about it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's nothing Catholic about the Bible, period. Like, there's nothing about, first of all, who in the Bible ever prayed to anybody but God in the Bible? Did David pray to Moses, to intercede a prayer for him? Absolutely not. None of that nonsense was going on up until recently,
Yeah, no, and I agree. There was a time where I was listening to a podcast where, it wasn't a Catholic podcast, but it was an Orthodox Christian podcast. And
same thing.
Similar. Very similar views about a lot of things.
They're next. I'm going after them next. But anyway, go ahead.
But, I had this fascination with the Orthodox Church, primarily because they had a view of Genesis and the Bible and origins and whatnot that really resonated with me. That I had the same sort of idea, I had the same sort of beliefs and whatnot. So I was like, okay, let me look into this. Let me see what they actually believe. And there are a lot of things that they hold to that make a lot of sense. They really, really do make a lot of sense. And with the way they interpret some of the scriptures, it kind of opened my eyes, at least.
To be honest with you, I never studied any of that. I was just woofing earlier, making fun. But no, I really don't know. No, go ahead.
But like some of their theology and the way that they interpret some of the New Testament and even the Old Testament, it makes a lot of sense. But then they start talking about praying to Mary, praying to saints.
Oh God, when I hear that, I just start breaking down.
Where are you going with this? Where are you pulling this out of Scripture? And they'll give arguments, and they'll say that the argument is relatively sound, and this is what they've been doing for thousands. That's what the church has been doing for thousands of years. And this is just the way that it is. It just you cannot pull it from the apostles' writings, from the words of Christ. Then where are you pulling it from? You cannot pull from anywhere in Scripture.
Nowhere. It's all misinterpretation, but the misinterpretation, I understand if it's a small one, but they bend it to the max to get out. Well, we're reading the same thing, but they try to pull out something crazy out of the same thing that we're reading, man. And it's really upsetting because it really does get on my nerves, man.
No, and I get it. I absolutely get it.
And that's why too, like I've been making these videos, and the thing is too, as I'm doing this, I'm also learning more. I'm also gaining new knowledge, and this knowledge that I'm gaining, I'm not trying to sound cocky because I think God's helping me. I'm getting smarter about this stuff. Like the more and more I learn about this, the less and less I want to argue with these people, because now I'm starting to see every person that I've argued with now in the past month with these people back and forth, they all have the same argument. They talk about, go read this, go read John 6:53, bro. You didn't read John 6:53, bro.
It's what's been spoon-fed to them.
Yeah. What about the guy on the cross, bro? The guy that went to heaven. It's the same argument. Yep. So at this point, this is what I tell them. I said, I have a podcast and I have these videos. I've already said this. It's the same thing to all these people. You go do that. They keep bugging me. I said, it's going to be $5 a minute. It's a waste of my, I'm being serious though. It's exhausting. It really is. It's the same argument over and over and over. Go read John 6:53, bro. You got to eat the body. You got to eat the flesh, bro. And it just gets really repetitive. And I just wish, I'm going to do, it's a good idea. Now I'm going to copy and paste answers and save it on my phone and just copy and paste and just send it, boom, boom, just to everybody. I don't even care what they're saying. It's eventually going to go to that subject. Boom, boom. So yeah, I've been doing a lot of research on this, and it's even like, I just see how far the reach is with with how powerful the Roman Catholic Church is as far as influence. Like it's a very scary how far the reach is. And right now their numbers are growing. And I'll tell you why they're growing is because this recent Pope, all he has done recently, ironically, right before he's dying, is pass all these left-wing liberal laws around the Vatican institution. For one, like especially that recently, Catholics either avoid this or they make an excuse for it or they outright deny it. But this is not a conspiracy. This is an open public statement that was made January 10th, 2025, where Pope Francis and the bishop had a little meeting, little committee to discuss, can we have LGBT pro priests in the church? And they decided, yes, they can, as long as they abstain from having sex. That was the requirement, right? And the argument is, oh, that means they're not even gay then because they're not having sex. I said, if that's the case, why did they have to make a document and announce it publicly? Obviously, a law got changed, dude. Like, stop living in a false reality. And number two, that right there is blasphemy. That is blasphemy to do this, 100%. Like, why would you do this? The world's crumbling right now, and this is what this is what God's hand-chosen leaders worried about right now, is making sure those people in those group are happy. Being a priest, that's ridiculous. And then after that, he also did this. He went to some kind of cultural appropriation meeting. There was a bunch of transgender dudes dancing around him. I don't know if you saw that video. There's like a bunch of dudes wearing
glad I haven't seen it.
Yeah. They're like wearing a little rainbow tidy-whities and they're dancing around him. There's a bunch of chicks and thongs and stuff dancing around him. And not too long after that little parade, he did this like serious speech and he said, all religions lead to God. And he specifically mentioned Islam, Buddhists, and other ones. But just the fact that he mixed those two with Christianity, saying that those are all the same paths to God, blasphemy. And even with that being on TV, and I send that video to people I argue with, they look at it and they just make up anything to make it. That's not what he really said. This is what the response. That's not what he really said. That's not what he really meant. Or the best one, he's a lot older guy. He's a lot older man, and older men like that, they don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Blah blah. I'm like, dude, are you serious? Are you serious? I said, do you think Paul, the Apostle Paul would say that? No, that's ridiculous. It's just so ridiculous, but. Yeah, I can go on and on all day about that, but unfortunately, I got 8 minutes left on my memory card. So whatever you got left to say, bro, for the last couple of minutes, go ahead and give us your last closing thoughts and stuff like that, brother. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I did want to kind of backtrack a little bit to the when we were talking about giants in South America and North America.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've talked about this on the show before, but the most compelling evidence that I've ever come across for, archaeological giants is the Sitika. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
What is that?
So I can't remember exactly where it is, but it's somewhere in the American Southwest, a place called Lovelock Cave.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that.
You have heard of that?
Yeah, Lovelock Cave. Yeah, it's one of like the famous discoveries. Yeah.
Yep. So, that's where, one of these Native American legends of the Sitika, that's where they supposedly, I think that's where they lived. And I think that's also where, the tribes that were warring against them basically either burned them alive or trapped them in there.
I know the story. What do you call it? The giants were sleeping in the cave and they pretty much trapped them in there and they set a fire in there and they smoked them out, right?
Yep, that's right.
So when they come out to breathe, there's two options. They either got hit with a bunch of arrows and spears, or you go inside and suffocate.
Burn to death,
and burn to death. Yeah, two options. Arrows or burn to death. That's what happened.
Don't want either one of those, so I'm glad I'm not a giant.
Thank goodness.
But the fact that it's compelling, the reason why I think it's so compelling is because they've actually found like giant sandals in that cave. They found
crazy stuff,
red hair and whatnot from the human remains that they found there. So while I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little bit more of a skeptic when it comes to ancient mysteries and whatnot. But when I saw that almost had me convinced, like, okay, maybe these Canaanite tribes did escape, and maybe they did make their way over to North America and, tried to do the same thing that they were doing over in Canaan in the ancient world with the Native Americans. And the Native Americans said, no, screw you guys. You're not having it.
Yeah, man. And then some of them said yes. I think the ones in the South America at the Mayas, I think those are the ones that accepted it. They were serpent worshiping, man. And a lot of people
feathered serpent.
Yeah, because I'm part Mexican and I live in a Mexican like culture place out here in Coachella Valley, and a lot of people, you can't even have this conversation because they get mad. Oh, blah, blah, blah. Like, dude, what are you getting? It just like, get your head out of your ass and listen to what I'm saying. You know what I mean? Like, this has nothing to do with a race. This is just history, dude. Like, like, I don't know why people just can't like listen, but I try to have this conversation with people, but they, I can't even get past it because they already think it's racist just because I'm talking about like, that Mayans and Aztecs, they were and used to eat people. Like, this is a fact. They used to cut people up and stuff like that. So
they engaged in that kind of sacrificial behavior. Yeah. And the fact that you brought up that they worship serpents, they worshiped Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. And say what you will about it, sure, that's culture. That's, a part of heritage and whatnot. Absolutely. But
I don't want to be a part of that.
That's what I'm saying. Is like, why would you want to identify with that culture when they were literally cutting the hearts out of people with a stone knife, like trying to inflict the most amount of pain before that person died, as possible. I remember in high school and middle school, them trying to, almost make the Aztecs seem like,
good people,
the good guys and whatnot. No. I'm sorry, but if you're cutting hearts out of people, that's not a good thing. No. I don't care if it's part of your culture or not. That's not a part of culture that I want to have anything to do with. And I'm glad that I don't have to worry about, the Aztecs coming to my neighborhood and rounding us up and sacrificing us to keep the sun in the sky.
Amen to that, brothers. We got to get on another podcast here. We're almost down to 2 minutes, my friend. But thank you very much, my friend. Thank you for coming on the show. Let me see.
It's been my pleasure. This has been a great conversation.
Yeah. Thank you again for coming on the show, brother. Again, really quick, the name of your book is what?
Cain Untold, Book 1. It's on Amazon. You can connect with me on Instagram at BK_Untold Stories, or you can look me up on Facebook, my book title, or you can find my name. Again, Cain Untold, Book 1. Look out for Book 2 coming out sometime this year, next year. We'll see. I have 2 baby girls, so who knows?
Blessed, my friend. You're blessed. Thank you again, brother, for coming on the show. I hope everybody enjoyed this episode. I went on a little rant at the end there about the RCC, but you know how I feel about that. I feel like the Lord put a fire in me to expose that, but that's for another time. But thank you again for coming on the show. Thank God for giving me these wonderful guests that come on and give us different stories and different insights. It's all connecting the dots somewhere, some way, somehow. Everyone's listening, and it helps everybody. Everybody has their own views on everything, and on this show we look at everything through a biblical lens, and just try to have discussions without wringing each other's neck. That has to be the next thing. We got to stop fighting with each other, and I'm guilty of doing it too. I'm learning too. We're all learning here. So God bless everybody. Thank you for listening to the show. I'm your host, Lionel Tavares from the Sabbath at Midnight. My friend, hang on the line while I close out here. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, follow us on all our social media accounts. We're on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and our main channel now is YouTube, The Sabbath at Midnight. There's only one of us, the neon pink and green crucifix, the 80s style logo. That is us. Please give us a follow, give us a like, tell your mom, your dad, your kids, your grandma, your grandpa, everybody about this show. Have a good evening from California. Good morning, good night, whatever the case may be, to all my listeners around the world. Finally, I feel alive, and I know why. Because I'm giving all the glory to the Most High. They don't want to hear the truth, that is no lie. If we ain't in the last days, then we're close by. The devil's trying to snatch your soul, and it's not a game. You hear me saying Jesus Christ, and it's not in vain. They might get offended every time I drop his name. But I'ma let them know that I'm not ashamed.
The idea is trusting in God even when it doesn't make sense. 2 Timothy 1 verse 12. This is why I am suffering as I am, yet I am not ashamed, because I know whom I have believed. I am convinced that he is able to guard what I have entrusted to him for that day. I am not ashamed.